At that same time, Basco saw him taking the money and was extremely angry at Daniel for taking advantage of an old lady. So later that day, he confronted Daniel, telling him that he was about to teach him a lesson. And ignoring his attempts to resolve the situation, he charged forward, launching a punch towards him. But Daniel smoothly evaded the attack. Basco didn't stop, so he continued throwing punches and kicks, but Daniel narrowly dodged all of his attacks. However, one of his blows had landed on Daniel's face, causing him to question why he was being attacked. Basco demanded that he returns the money the old lady had given him, but Daniel refused and evaded another kick. However, Daniel's subsequent punch didn't do any damage to Basco, but as he remembered the moves he learned from Jae-seong, he charged towards him, expertly evading his punch, and with precision, he delivered a powerful blow with his elbow, leaving Basco unconscious. As he left, he asked Bayam-hee to take care of him. Later that night, Basco stopped by the store, and after seeing Fat Daniel, he told him to begin training in case he ever needed to use his muscles for combat. Daniel listened to his words, and began doing push-ups, but all the Doritos he was eating tired him out, and he fell on his belly. As a young lady entered the store, she was impressed by his effort and bought him a drink, making him realize that he found the love of his life to simp over. So he swore to become a gym bro and to never give up on his goal of having a ripped body. The following day at school, Daniel rescued a fat student, Deok-pa, from being bullied and called a filthy pig. But everyone began to wonder why he wasn't supporting the bullies. Jae-yol was concerned about him and the rumors saying he was from a poor family, so he became determined to help him. At the convenience store, a girl with an endearing charm walked in and tried asking for Fatso's number, but he was too ashamed and said that he didn't have a phone. But she smiled and encouraged him to believe in himself, assuring him that he looks like a strong stallion.
Stop the cap! Stop the cap right now!
In the cafeteria, Deok-pa questioned why Daniel had invited him, saying he didn't have any money to pay for protection. However, Daniel told him he only desired to be friends with him because they were similar. But when he heard those words, Deok-pa became furious, suspecting he was being toyed with. Daniel had always looked very rich, so there was no reason he would settle for a loser like him. As Daniel walked home, he came across Jae-yol, who gave him a new set of clothes for his birthday. So after accepting it, Daniel discovered the clothes were worth a fortune, and soon noticed another gift at his doorstep. The following day, he walked into the class wearing his new designer brands, and all the students were stunned to see him, and began wondering how he could afford it. Later that day, Deok-pa was bullied again, and the bullies demanded that he gave them his McDonald's money. But since he didn't have any, they punched him in the stomach and tore his audition form for a talent show, commanding that he becomes their errand boy until he paid. As he delivered their meals, they called him a pig, hitting him on the head, and asking him to bring them water while running. But despite his efforts, they tripped him and asked him to go again. Having seen enough, Daniel stood up to defend him, so Jae-yol and Jin-seong followed him for support, all ready to take on the bullies. But another group appeared, ready to make it a three-way battle. However, Basco decided to also show up in the middle of this because he needed some showtime, and challenged Daniel to another fight. But he was stopped by the other group who were afraid of seeing him humiliated in the presence of all the students. Daniel blamed himself for Deok-pa's troubles and tried fixing the audition form, but as he gave it back, Deok-pa confronted him for pretending to be a good person. He believed Daniel only did it to gain popularity, so he told him he wasn't a fool, and that the humiliation he faced only increased his passion for rap music, like his favorite singer, Eminem. As the days passed, Deok-pa was beaten up by his bullies, who turned him to their punchback, demanding he quits the renowned talent show. He tried fighting back, but ended up losing his note of musical lyrics as they tore it to pieces before his eyes. Meanwhile, Daniel began showing interest in the show, and his friends encouraged him to participate. But he never wanted to go up in front of others, so he rejected the idea immediately. However, he continued to remember Deok-pa's words about music, and remembered he loved singing too. As Deok-pa came across him,
Bruh, look at this dude.
He apologized to Daniel for his rudeness the other day, and after complimenting his voice, he advised that he sings on the show, and invited him to his home so he can test how deep his voice pipe can go.
Hell no. No, no, no.
However, he was worried that Daniel would see the shabby state of his house and consider him clumsy and dirty. But after arriving, Daniel volunteered to help him tidy up, and suggested switching off the lights to save on electricity bills. He began stacking up the newspapers scattered on the floor, and Deok-pa realized that Daniel must have had a great upbringing. So Daniel told him his mom had taught him everything he knew. But he immediately apologized for doing too much and admitted it wasn't his place to teach Deok-pa how he should clean his own home. However, Deok-pa assured him he did nothing wrong, so they began their musical practice. During the practice, Daniel began doubting his ability to sing, and wondered if he could really pull it off at the show. But Deok-pa encouraged him and played a beautiful melody he had composed on his computer. Daniel recognized the tune, and was happy to hear it, saying he always sang it every time he felt sad and lonely. Deok-pa was touched by his warm response and became motivated to work harder. After their practice, Deok-pa was walking Daniel home when they came across his grandmother's food stall. So after Daniel introduced himself as Deok-pa's friend, she told him her grandson had many friends, who were mostly unpleasant and nasty little shits that bullied him. This stirred up unhappy memories for Deok-pa, reminding him of the dreadful things his classmates had done to her. As she offered Daniel food, he graciously declined. He understood the hardship she faced in her work, and had no desire to further add to her burden. The following day at school, Deok-pa gave Daniel the lyrics to their song, hoping they can begin practicing for the show. So later that day, Deok-pa told Daniel that he felt his emotion while he was singing. But little did he know that Daniel indeed understood his struggles, but could not tell his own secret to anyone. Deok-pa reminded him they had only 2 weeks left to the show, but were still a long way in perfecting the song. So he advised him to shift his focus to learning the song until he could sing it perfectly from the heart. And so Daniel retired for the night, thinking about Deok-pa's challenges and feeling sorry for him. While practicing at work the following day, Soo-young appeared before his eyes, complimenting his voice and offering him a pack of sweets that would help him in singing. Because of those magical sweets, Daniel began singing like a siren the next day, impressing Deok-pa, who was unaware that Daniel had been practicing in another body. After several hours, Deok-pa's bullies arrived and beat him up for practicing with Daniel. They tried to force his friend to hit him too, but he refused. Later that night, he and his friend visited Fatso at his workplace, apologizing for hitting him in the past. But Daniel told him he understood he was afraid of the bullies and forgave him. They began to share their experiences with bullies, and soon developed a unique bond. But when Deok-pa began talking about Daniel's other persona, saying he was a new student that was kind to everyone, Basco walked into their conversation, wondering if that was really the truth. They told him that Daniel was actually a kind man, so he began feeling ashamed of himself, realizing that he was wrong about Daniel after all, so he told Fatso he could come by to train whenever he wanted. As days passed, Daniel and Deok-pa continued to practice for the show, with Daniel improving every day. Meanwhile, at Ho Bin's studio, he plotted a scheme to ruin their experience at the show. So the day of the show finally arrived, and Daniel was feeling very anxious about his performance, but Deok-pa encouraged him to stay calm and confident. Having spotted Soo-young, he rushed to greet her, but she took him for a perv, since she didn't recognize him in this other body. When Daniel tried to convince her that he had no bad intentions towards her, her bodyguard suddenly grabbed him, but he shook off his grip. The man perceived it as a hostile reaction and an invitation for a fight, so he launched a straight kick at Daniel. But he defended himself with his arms. However, it was a feint, as the man swiftly changed tactics and delivered a powerful side kick to Daniel's head, immediately knocking him to the ground, coughing. The guard prepared to deliver a finishing blow, but Soo-young urged him to stop, yet he refused, saying he was ordered to annihilate anyone who tried to touch her. But Basco arrived, calling himself Daniel's friend, and threatening to beat up the guard. In a split second, the man punched Basco in the face, but he remained unfazed despite being injured, demanding that the guard remove his glasses so they could fight fairly. But Soo-young stepped in before it escalated further, and eventually departed with him, leaving Basco and Daniel alone. Basco fell to his knees, groaning in pain, and realizing he wasn't strong enough to defeat the man in a fight. As they sat together, he offered Daniel a drink and apologized for their earlier misunderstandings. As the show finally began, Ho Bin took the stage for his performance, thrilling the crowd with his fantastic song. In the backstage, Daniel was very nervous, so Deok-pa advised him to imagine singing for someone he deeply loved, telling him it would help in calming his nerves. After they appeared on the stage, the crowd was amazed by Daniel's appearance, but the host made fun of Deok-pa, saying he looked like a completely different specimen, and that brought laughter from the audience. As it was finally time to sing, Daniel took a deep breath, gazing at the crowd, but he was shocked by his terrible sound. Ho Bin laughed at him, saying he sang like a goat, and the crowd's excitement began to wane. But Deokpa stepped up and took the microphone. He began delivering incredible lines that boosted Daniel's confidence, awakening his inner spirit, and leaving the audience awed by their amazing performance. At the end of the show, they were named winners, and Ho Bin couldn't help but recognize the differences in their talents. So his producer left him, offering to work with Daniel and giving out his business card, apologizing for not recognizing their talents during the audition. When Deokpa thanked him for his kind words, the man told him the opportunity was being offered to Daniel alone, saying he was too fat and ugly to work with. So Daniel declined the offer, unwilling to work with a man that acts like a total dick. Meanwhile, inside a mansion, Soo-young watched the talent show, wondering how Daniel knew the song she'd heard the fatso singing at the store. After the show, she looked at a fat girl sleeping by her side, her own body.